Hello and welcome to this free agency disaster edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your hyperbolic host, Joe Johnson, owner of purplePTSD.com, periodic writer for VikingsTerritory.com. Here with Mr. Luke Braun, the birthday boy who just turned 25 on Sunday, which I just found out 2 seconds ago. We don't actually have a relationship outside of the show.
Baby. I'm a little baby.
Yeah, you know, I'm the Joe Oberly of this podcast. I guess I'm the elder statesman.
Yeah, how does it feel to be old?
Awful, actually.
Can't wait.
Oh God, I'm falling apart. But speaking of falling apart, we're without our Zen master yet again, who disappeared into the wilderness sometime this weekend. Joe Oberly, who writes for us and writes for the Sports Post. I should mention, since I'm really bad at this, that Luke also writes for the purplePTSD.com and has his own podcast, the Infinite Monkeys podcast, which is slowly overtaking ours in terms of popularity and relevance.
I don't think that's true.
I don't pay attention. But speaking,
we always get off to such a good start.
I hate this, man. I dread it for like 2 or 3 days. Like I can't sleep. So we have a special guest on our show today to discuss the draft, Mr. JR. What's your Twitter handle?
It's JReidDraft Scout, so it'll be JReid Draft Scout. You know, there's like a million different ways to spell read, so I always have to say it out for everybody.
Yeah, my name's Joe Johnson, and people always say S-O-N, and I'm like, is there any other way to spell Johnson? Like, there's no Johnsons with an E. This isn't Denmark.
That's a very Minnesotan thing.
Isn't
That's like super Scandinavian, like Olsen's with an E,
Mm-hmm.
or Peterson's with an E.
Totally. Frickin' Swedes. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show, man. I don't know if you want to just let the people who probably already tuned out at this point know a little bit more about who you are and kind of what you do.
Yeah, first of all, just thank y'all for having me on, man. It's a pleasure being here. You know, I love talking the draft, and you know, just a pleasure being here. But you know,
pleasure to have you.
No problem, man. Just a little bit about myself. I'm an avid North Carolina Vikings fan, and you know, like I explained to you guys earlier, it's like, well, how in the world did you end up being a Viking fan from North Carolina?
Yeah, man.
That's long story short. I grew up during the Dante Culpepper, Randy Moss era, and you know, I just stayed with the team ever since then. But right now, I'm currently writing about the draft for the Viking age, so I'm
That's
excited.
Awesome. Yeah, that's all of us kind of grew up in the same. I'm a little bit older. I think I was probably a freshman in high school when Moss was a rookie, and it just changed my perspective on football. As I talk about this on the show a lot, but my dad is a fervent Vikings fan. Like, this is the only time I've ever seen him. Speaking of Swedes, he's kind of a stoic Swede. The only time he shows emotion ever is during a Vikings game. So when Moss came and oh God, it was just it turned from an obligation of watching the game with my dad on Sunday into being the highlight of my week, and I think that kind of frames the way that we all think about the team. I don't know if you agree with that, Luke or JR, but to me it seems like, especially with the draft, I always want to return back to that era. You know, I'm always looking for the next Randy Moss or the next skill player like Adrian Peterson who can bring the team to the levels of like NFL 2K on Dreamcast type offense where you just run all streak and throw it to Moss every time.
I wonder if there's going to be like a generation now of Vikings fans that just want us to draft the top running back every year.
I do think there's something to them, and I think that Minnesota fans kind of get complacent with these like once in a generation or once in a lifetime talents, either whether it's basketball or football or even baseball, man. I mean, it just seems like people take what Adrian Peterson did for granted, and you know, obviously he's getting older and everything, but his production is something that you can't just pencil in for next season just because we did, you know, replace him with arguably the most sought after free agent running back, but
the least not sought after maybe is a better way to put that, because nobody wanted running backs.
Yeah,
and I always wonder who's going to be next. Like, you know, Moss had his generation and Peterson had his generation, and I really don't know who's going to be that next guy in Minnesota.
Bull Ringer.
Teddy.
Bull Ringer. I'm riding this Bullringer thing forever, man. I don't care what happens.
I'm with you on this train. I love that pick for the worst reasons.
Why? Because it makes me look bad, or?
No, it just I jumped for. I was watching the draft last year with my dad, and he can tell I jumped for joy I literally jumped off the couch when we drafted Bullringer.
Yep.
Just because I love the kid.
Me too,
it just
man.
made me happy. I don't care if he never makes the team. I'm just happy.
Me and Justin Sticht, who I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his last name, but we went to the Buffalo Wild Wings introduction of Treadwell after we drafted him, and Norv Turner showed up, and there's a picture on our Facebook page of me proving why I'm single standing next to Norv Turner, and I whispered to him because the guy couldn't get the camera on my phone to work, and it was really awkward. It took like 5 minutes. He was getting pissed off, and I said, you got to take Bullringer tonight because it was the second round was coming that day, second, third, fourth, or whatever. And so I got really excited when he did, and I feel personally responsible for that. But he did an interview for our site basically because of that story. So hopefully we can reach out to him this season and see like what the plans are with him. You know, I know they're looking for a tight end right now. Don't you guys think logically like he would be a great tight end?
Well,
does he have the size for it?
He's 6'5", man, and he runs like a 4.3, 4.4. He's basically, when I saw him at training camp last year, I kept mistaking him for Kyle Rudolph, but he was like the fastest guy on the field. So he's got the size of a tight end, but he's just really fast. Am I just making that up? But
he has really great measurables. Like even looking at his spider graph, I'm not sure if you guys know exactly what the spider graph is. It's like
from like mock draftables.
Yeah, mock draftables.
Yeah. Explain it in case there are people who don't.
Yeah, so basically, a spider graph is all it is it takes everything they do at the combine and every measurement that they take, and it basically breaks it into percentiles. And the higher the percentile is, the bigger their web graph will be. And he has like reached the edge of almost every single measure. It was amazing.
I wrote an article about that specific thing, saying that Bullringer had the best average measurables I've seen since they started. I think they started in '99, at least on mock draftables, because I wanted to look at Randy Moss's, but they weren't available. The closest person I could compare him to was Calvin Johnson, just in terms of pure measurables. I mean, his graph was huge, and I use that kind of as an argument to say, like, this is why we shouldn't go after Treadwell. Like, I was a huge anti-Treadwell guy.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we did a live chat of the draft, and the first thing I said was anyone but Treadwell, and it was like watching a Dateline mystery like slowly unfold, and it was just awful. I saw it happening. Like, we're gonna end up with Treadwell. But yeah, man, I think that Bullringer's got everything that you need. He just hasn't played organized football long enough. So I don't know. It's kind of a side point, but I think if they're looking for a tight end, it makes sense for them to kind of look internally first. But we touched on.
I was gonna ask about this actually while we're on Treadwell. I was gonna ask about this later, but since you touched on it now, JR, I know you've been super vocal about Treadwell. Do you want to quick just like go over what your thoughts on Treadwell are? Because I know you were super vocal leading up to last year's draft, and then even more vocal afterwards. You want to just talk about what your thoughts on Treadwell are? Yeah,
well, I was a big Treadwell fan actually pre-draft. He was my number one wide receiver on my board, just because you know I really liked what I saw out of him at Ole Miss. He had everything that I like to see in a receiver prospect. You know, the one thing that he did lack was creating separation. But the thing that he did do, he was a go-getter of the football at Ole Miss, which kind of, you know, made me kind of relax on his separation part, because I thought, you know, his mentality is a bulldog and a pit bull, I should say. And being a go-getter of the football, I thought he would be able to overcome those separation issues.
What do you think? What do you think the biggest issue is with him not getting on the field? I've read that he only ran like 4 routes at Ole Miss, and he's struggling similar to what Patterson was having trouble with. Is there something to that, or do you just think that he just has to acclimate to the game? And obviously, as a guy who doesn't create separation, he has to go up and fight for the ball. And obviously, NFL DBs are stronger, bigger, and faster than the ones he faced in college. So what do you think his struggles have been? I know, real quick, too, that Chris Carter, who I was supposed to interview last weekend, but I guess I didn't make the cut for obvious reasons. He said something about how he's been in touch with Treadwell and trying to help him with his game, too. So I wasn't sure what specifically he's helping him with, or what you think that he needs to do to help, you know, get on the field and produce this season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate, you know, how important understanding the terminology of a playbook is, and that it varies per team. A lot of people like to say that Michael Thomas had a really good year in New Orleans, but
Yeah.
you know, for people that really watch film, they simplified a lot of stuff for Michael Thomas to where he was only running 3 to 4 different routes at a time.
Okay.
And we all know with North Turner, it's either his way or the highway, basically. You're going to run what he calls or what he says on this play. And if you don't know the playbook, he's not going to play you. And I think that was the biggest issue with Treadwell. He didn't have a complete understanding of the playbook. And then Zimmer came out and said that he battled injuries, which really put him behind the 8 ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's having injuries on part of not taking those, you know, in practice reps. He was just behind. And, you know, the one game that he did play a lot was in Detroit, and he was a complete mess in that game. I watched that game like 5 times. He was a complete mess that entire game, just like he was pressing too hard and trying to do too much, just because he hasn't had those reps.
What specifically, like, was he doing that you noticed that was like, in regards to pressing too much? Was he not creating?
Just looked erratic.
Erratic.
Yeah, he looked erratic and very nervous. Just like you can tell when a person is trying too hard, and you could tell he was amped up, but he was just too antsy and trying too hard. That's what it looked like.
It's like the intro to the show, basically. Yeah, man. I don't want to like rag on the guy that's on the team whose success dictates my mood, you know. But it just seems like, I don't know. I don't know why he was. A lot of quote-unquote draft experts said he was the most pro-ready wide receiver of the bunch, and I guess I don't see where that was coming from. But speaking of the spider graphs, my thing with Treadwell is that his measurables in the places where you think he would be good, like vertical jump and bench press, like upper body strength, he was in like the sub 20 percentile on both of those. So that, I guess, was my concern with him. But
yeah, he was very, very disappointing in those areas. He really didn't stand out in anything besides the 10-yard split. Which was expected because he's very explosive the first 10 yards, but his long speed is what really scouts question. And it makes sense because he failed to separate. So,
do you think that
his long the 40 time
do you
and all
think
that too?
That they brought him in specifically to be like the wide receiver, the go-to guy for Teddy, since Teddy was throwing so many short passes? They picked up the guy who's like the quickest, like you said, quickest at 0 to 10, but the slowest from 10 to 40 or whatever. Do you think that Teddy getting injured hurt his spot on the team? Or
possibly, and we can't discount Heineke getting hurt as well. Those were the 2 guys he was training with all summer, as well as Sean Hill. You know, and we know Shermer and North Turner's offense is all timing based. So and then, you know, with Bradford coming in, you know, like 8 or 9 days, whatever it was, before the first game, it kind of like shocked him, I think, a bit.
Yeah. And
then just going back to the whole draft thing, I still believe to this day that Josh Dotson was their guy, and the Redskins kind of blinded them by drafting. Yeah.
I think so too, man. I think that I've always compared the Treadwell pick to the Ponder pick. It was like no wide receivers were taken up until like the 19th pick, and then all of a sudden all the wide receivers are getting taken off the board, and it seemed like kind of a panic pick. Like, we need a wide receiver, let's just take the best guy available. And it was the same thing with Ponder. You know, they had to run Jake Locker and everyone from like 8 to 10. We had the 11th pick, and we took Ponder, who wasn't our guy, but they said, well, you know, he'll be decent. So I don't know. I mean, hopefully, there's an opportunity for him to step up this year. You know, we lost a couple of our wide receivers in free agency, and so I guess we'll see what happens.
If the problem does come down to like acclimation and comes down to like getting used to the game speed, like that is the kind of thing that I feel confident that, you know, a whole off season with Bradford will help with, and another or a whole, by off season I mean like OTAs and training camp and stuff, and just the ability to get through not being a rookie, not being brand new, and not just having that extra little bit of experience under his belt can go a long way toward those things, and the kid's young.
Yeah,
absolutely. If he continues to struggle this year, fans should really worry, just because he's had a whole off season in the same system and with the same quarterback. So I think he should be fine this year. But another thing that really scares me about the whole situation is, them really chasing Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah,
that kind of worries me about his progress and what they really think of Treadwell. So, but we'll see.
Oh my God, dude, we're best friends, man. We argued that exact point like 2 shows ago, and I think that's the reason that Joe Oberle hasn't been showing up, because we kind of got into it. Well, it was more me and Luke, but basically I was saying the same thing, that if they're going after Alshon Jeffrey for a multi-year deal, it seems like they don't have the utmost confidence in Treadwell's development, and
Right.
I guess Luke didn't agree with that logic. We both agreed that Treadwell wasn't where we wanted him to be, so it was kind of a worthless argument, but it's the Vikings. You got to have worthless arguments. So, speaking of which, I kind of touched on this, and you guys said a couple things about the big news this past week was that the Vikings signed former Raiders running back Latavius Murray, and I had said that he was probably I more meant that he was probably the best running back available out of all the free agents, but it seemed to, at least for some people, a couple of articles where AJ Mansour wrote an article like maybe we should reassess free agency, maybe it's not a disaster after all. What are your guys' thoughts on that move?
Go ahead, Jared.
I actually like the signing. He was a part of a running back by committee last year in Oakland, and I think he thrived in it, honestly. I think the biggest thing that fans have to realize is that he's not going to be Adrian Peterson.
Yep.
And that's a big thing for fans to overcome, just because, the Vikings backfield has been so great for so long. They can't hold them to the expectations of being, Adrian Peterson. When Latavius Murray is asked to be, that power back, he can pass protect.
Yep.
He gets out of the backfield. He can be that short yardage and red zone guy that can punch it in the end zone. I think that's when he's at his best. But if he's asked to be a feature back, he's not that type of guy. But I think if he can be in a 3 running back committee, he'll be just fine in his role. He's an upgrade over Asiata, definitely.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too. I see him as an Asiata upgrade because I think, if you look at the running back core from last year, you have Asiata, who's a thumper but can also be kind of a third down pass protecting back. You've got Adrian Peterson, who is at this point in his career pretty much a pure thumper, and then Jerick McKinnon, who plays his more pass catching role, more outside role. And I think we've just upgraded on our third down, pass blocking and thumper back and short yardage kind of guy. I still think we need to go get that pure thumper in the draft. And I think last year we had that pure thumper in Adrian Peterson, and we just would use him way too much. And I think that about 2015 too. We just used our thumper way too much because of his reputation. But we still need to replace him.
Yeah, I think
and I think we can do that in the draft.
Yeah, I think Murray, picking up Murray accomplishes, checks a couple boxes that they needed. I mean, he's a top 3 or 4 pass blocking running back in the league, according to people that cover the Raiders. I'll read kind of what this guy from the RaidersAnalysis.com wrote a briefing on Murray, just so people kind of get an idea what kind of running back he is if they haven't seen him play. He says, Murray is okay at catching. He'll catch the easy ones, but don't expect him to reach out for passes. He's a great pass protector, maybe one of the best in the league. Big, fast athlete. He's tall and runs upright, which gets him in trouble. Doesn't lower the shoulder as much as you want, which is something I think people will miss from Peterson, minus the fumbles. Vision is below average. Feet are average to below average. He got better at zone running, but it's not ideal. His best fit is a gap scheme where he could run full speed into a hole. Goes down on first contact more than people realize. So he's kind of the anti-AP, even though he's like an inch taller and 5 pounds heavier, in that he doesn't break a lot of tackles, it sounds like. But, when it comes to picking up, blitzes and protecting Bradford, that's going to be huge, and we can take advantage of, a lot more play action than we were doing, I think. But I know, I'm surprised. I thought he was like a really good pass-catching back, but I guess he's just average. But AP was terrible, so what would it's an upgrade, I guess. But what you're saying, Luke, is that we still need to find that third back.
Yeah, I don't think he replaces AP. I think he upgrades on Asiata significantly.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I agree with that.
Do you guys feel like when it comes to the draft and the offensive line, the pieces that we brought in Reef and Remmers, what is just your guys' thoughts as a whole on free agency? It seems to me, and I'm probably just stuck in this weird bubble of hyper fervent Vikings fans based on where I get my information from, Reddit, Facebook, not so much Twitter, but people seem super disappointed and they want to fire Spielman, and I think that was just based on really high expectations because we had a lot of cap space to work with, people not realizing that we needed to save some of it to sign players next season. But I mean, do you guys look at the draft as, at least on paper, an upgrade over last season, or where are you guys at on that?
Go ahead, Jerry.
I was completely fine with free agency. You know, everybody wanted Spielman to chase the guys like, you know, like a Rick Wagner and an Andrew Whitworth, but I thought he kind of picked and chose his battles really wisely as far as just waiting and letting the market set itself and just picking guys that he can afford that still would allow him to go and sign his young core in 2018 and 2019, because he has a lot of guys that he has to re-sign these next few years. So I like the signing of Remmers and I like the signing of Reif, just because, you know, it doesn't put the Vikings in salary cap danger in the future, but it upgrades spots as well, because, you know, we can't get any worse than TJ Clemens and Matt Khalil. We know that at this point. But the thing I did like is that, you know, those two guys were playing out of position last year. You know, Reif was playing right tackle for the Lions last year, something he really hasn't done up to last season at all. He was always playing left tackle for those guys before they drafted Taylor.
And wasn't Remmers doing the same thing, but on the opposite?
Yeah, because Michael Orr was dealing with the concussion issues for the Panthers, so he had to transition over to left tackle. So both those guys were playing out of position.
Yeah, and you being from Carolina, did you catch a lot of Panthers games and get to see Remmers play out of position a lot, or no?
Not really. I don't really catch a lot of Panthers games here. I mainly focus on the Vikings, honestly.
Sunday ticket?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, Luke?
I mean, about free agency in general?
Yeah, like, or this the response to it. Actually, since we talked about this and I got distracted, I'm going to play some calming music as we talk about this, because people seem to be panicking. I wrote an article, Stop Panicking, and so as you explained,
people are definitely panicking. People are panicking, and they definitely need to calm down.
Yeah. Because
the people who are panicking have a fundamental issue in the way that they're evaluating free agency.
Stupidity.
Well, it stems from that. The free agency awards you a player when you have the highest evaluation of that player. I said this last week. Yeah. It does not reward you when you have the correct evaluation of that player. The Cardinals had the highest evaluation of Mike Iupati a couple years ago, and they were awarded Mike Iupati. We did not think as highly of him, and it ended up working out. And I think that some of these, these like ones who got away, we just didn't think as highly of them, or they had other things like Rick Wagner, who's from Detroit, so he went to play in Detroit. There's nothing we can do about that. I think we upgraded there's no question that we upgraded, and we did so at a reasonable price. Yeah. I think people who don't like Riley Reif are trying to undersell what that contract was. The plan is for Riley Reif to be the long-term left tackle, the way that contract looks. They put a lot of eggs in that Riley Reif basket. I personally am totally okay with that, but if you don't think he'll be good, I think that makes people that should make people upset, but then they'd also be wrong, because he's a pretty good left tackle.
Yeah.
I think people wanted to go out and get all the premier guys, and no team ever does that. We had holes to fill, and we filled them. We've still got a lot of work to do, and I'm not jumping for joy. I think I tweeted about it that it's like I just cleaned my apartment. Like, I'm not excited about the experience. I'm not, like, bouncing off the walls about it, but business had to be taken care of.
Yeah, I just keep going back to the fact that last season I can't count how many times I saw people say, if we only had a decent offensive line, ... and it seems like on paper that's exactly what we have. I mean, this team still, regardless of what the elder Ellison says, is a few pieces away from being a contender. It's not in rebuilding mode, and I think a lot of the
that's an insane claim. People being like, well, now they're going into a rebuild, and a lot of national pundits are thinking that we're like panicking and that we're desperate because we went and got Riley Reif. I actually think he's a good pickup.
Did you see that Zimmer called Ricky Ellison and left him a voicemail, but he didn't call him back?
Yeah.
Drama.
I wish I could hear that voicemail.
Oh God, man. Zimmer with one eye just going off. That'd be great.
I saw somebody have a great take that because he was calling Ricky Ellison, he that's a mistake to call him, because he should be focusing on free agency more.
Well, it's not like it took a lot of time. I mean,
isn't that a great take?
Yeah. God. Well, speaking of I got no segue. Punters.
Speaking of free agents who left.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, man. It's been a long day. Luke wrote his perplexingly huge punter piece. This is becoming an annual thing for purplePTSD.
I love punters, man. I mean, I love punters too, and I'm very happy about it. But y'all really love punters.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I don't get it personally, but you know, I should. We used to have Mitch Berger, and he'd eat a Snickers and kick it through the roof. Those were the days. But yeah, do you want to just kind of touch on your article and what the premise was? And then
yeah,
kind of
I've talked about punters before, but basically the best stat we have that's like mainstream is net punting yards, and it is completely meaningless because it generates like a 30-yard punt seems bad, but could actually be very good if you punted it from the 45 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I explain my methodology in the article, but it's a different methodology for evaluating punters by taking every punt and deciding whether it's short field or long field, whether they're trying to, pin you to as close to the end zone as possible, or if you're punting from your own 20-yard line, you're just trying to boot it, and then evaluating punts that way. Go read the article if you want national takes. There's some people who fell away. There's some people who improved. But since this is the Vikings podcast, I'll just talk about Jeff Locke, who we lost, and a lot of people are mad about that.
Definitely.
He was bad. He was #bad. He was like 6th worst in the league by these measures, and he was down there with other guys who have been losing their jobs. So I definitely don't blame the Vikings for not wanting to match the Colts offer and just going with Taylor Simek, who is the guy that they signed to a futures contract, and he's pretty much the de facto punter right now.
When did they sign him?
During the playoffs, nobody paid any attention to it because it was a punter.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we already have our punter in camp unless they decide to bring in another one, which I wouldn't have a problem with as long as they don't spend a pick on.
Chris Cluey, man.
He's still got that's about it for the punter article. Go read it if you want to learn more about everybody else's punters.
I'll link it in there too, in the article.
It's funny you guys said that. A couple beat writers from Minnesota Vikings beat writers, they tweeted out the other day that the Vikings are actually inviting a punter for their top 30 visits. His name is Worth Gregory from East Carolina.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
So they're not happy, or they're not going to just go in with Simek. That makes sense. They don't really know anything about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's one. I don't know. Spending one of your top 30 meetings. Weird. Well, speaking of the draft, I guess we should get into that because that's JR's bread and butter. And it seems to be the big focus for everybody. I mean, I think a lot of people that were disappointed with free agency immediately looked at the draft, and there was some inklings that I picked up through JR's Twitter that the Vikings might be looking to trade up or whatever, which is common around this time of year. But considering we have Slick Rick as our GM, there's really nothing that would surprise me. But I guess when it comes to the draft, first just kind of look at what the options are or what you think that they're looking at for reinforcing the offensive line. JR, if you want to kind of go first.
Yeah, so I think the biggest emphasis will be offensive line, like everyone pretty much under the sun knows. The Minnesota Vikings offensive line is like the biggest weakness on the team. But, the thing that I like about what they did was they protected the edges in free agency. What I mean by that is, they shored up the offensive tackles, which was their biggest weakness a year ago. Yeah. They exchanged Clemens and Khalil for Rimmers and Reef. So they shored up their edges. Now, they can fill the interior through the draft. And the good thing about that is it's a strong interior offensive line class. Okay. So they really set themselves up for success a lot with this draft. There's a lot of guys that they can, plug and play right away in the draft. So that's what I really liked about what they did.
Who would be your dream guy for us to get with our first pick?
Well, back in August, I've been tooting this guy's horn, and now he's starting to blow up. Well, not starting to blow up. He's a surefire first rounder right now. Forrest Lamp.
Yeah.
It's been my guy. It's been my guy since August. You know, back then I was saying I love Lamp. Hashtag I love Lamp. And everybody was like, why are you saying this? And now, like,
Anchorman.
It makes sense now. It makes sense now.
That is dude, there's so many opportunities with his name. You got Anchorman, you got Forrest Gump, man. It's perfect. You think we have a chance to get him, or will we have to trade up?
Yeah, he'll already be on his flight to the team that drafts him by the time the Vikings pick. So he'll be long gone. Even if they do decide to trade up, I think they have to give up like almost near their entire draft to get him. I think he'll go top 20. I think that high of him.
Okay.
I've compared him to Zach Martin. I think he'll have that type of impact, whoever drafts him. He's a top 20 guy for me.
Yikes.
But
so of the realistic options, who would be your favorite pick that you would walk away from day 2 of the draft the happiest with?
Right now, it would be Indiana right guard Dan Feeney. That's my guy, man.
Okay.
I like him a lot. He's a gritty, tough guy. The thing that I love about Feeney the most is that he's played right guard mostly all of his career at Indiana. They asked him to play right tackle one game just because they had injuries along the offensive line. But other than that, he's played right guard his entire career at Indiana. And check this stat out. In 3 years at Indiana, he gave up 1 sack. That's amazing, right? That's amazing.
Yikes.
Gave up 1 sack and 3 QB hurries in his entire career. So
Dan Feeney.
Yeah. He's a really good player.
And what are your thoughts on that, Luke?
I mean, I don't know much about him as a person, or as Dan Feeney specifically. I haven't really
I just want more
done
in
a lot
general.
of reading on. More in general. I think I'd echo what JR said about shoring up the edges so that you have a little bit of flexibility, because it would really suck to go into the second round of the draft being like, well, we have to take a left tackle because we can't do anything. That's kind of how you end up getting Doxson sneaked away from you and then having to go with the next best thing and getting Treadwell.
Yep.
And I think we've avoided that kind of situation, which I'm happy about. And at that point, there's all these options. There's Feeney. There's Pat Eiflein is a name that I've heard thrown around. There's Taylor Moton if you want to go get competition for Remmers at right tackle, or move Remmers into right guard, and then you have options that way. So they're kind of suddenly you've opened up this world of you have a whole bunch of options to pick. One of them's going to fall to you, and options are always better.
Yeah, and when earlier you said that you think that the Vikings need to add a third running back, is there somebody in the draft that you think would be the third wheel or the third component to make? Are you looking for another thumping running back, or more of a skilled pass catching guy like Curtis Samuel from Ohio State?
Much more interesting. I thought Curtis Samuel was a wide receiver.
He's
a little bit of both.
He's
a
split.
A little bit of both.
He's like Percy Harvin.
I actually really would love for the Vikings to draft Curtis Samuel. As for a running back, though, I would. I'm definitely more interested in a thumper. Of those guys that are kind of the downhill between the tackles, big bowling ball guys. JR, are there any names that you have highlighted on your list?
Yeah, so there's really 3 guys that kind of fit that category that'll be in the Vikings range. First up, one of them that I really like is Samaje Perine from Oklahoma. He's a shorter guy. He's about 5'10". I think he measured at around 225, 230 pounds.
Wow.
He puts you in the mind of Michael Turner. I'm not sure if you guys remember him.
Yeah.
He's a split image of that guy. Just a tough, guy. Downhill runner. Not really a big pass catcher out of the backfield, but he can get you those short yards. And, if you need a score in the end zone, if you're inside the 5 or the 10-yard line, he's your guy. Another guy is Jamal Williams from BYU. He's a guy that I like as well, but, I kind of question his scheme fit with the Vikings because he's not necessarily a shotgun runner.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
He kind of struggles running out of the shotgun
like
at
AP.
times.
Sounds like a great AP replacement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He kind of brings those same kind of questions that Adrian Peterson does. He's not a great pass protector, and he kind of struggles running out of the shotgun just because he's shown to be more comfortable out of the I formation where he can just run downhill and attack the line of scrimmage. And another guy is Deontay Foreman from Texas.
Yes.
I believe he measured at about 6 foot, about 235 pounds. But one thing a lot of people have to understand about Foreman is that yes, he's 235 pounds, but he doesn't necessarily run like he's 235 pounds.
Okay.
So that kind of scares me a little bit about him, but he's still a really good player. But he just doesn't necessarily run like as big as he really is. But overall, I think he would be a really good fit for the Vikings. The biggest question with Foreman is that he only has 13 pass catches in his career at Texas. So a lot of people are really questioning how good his hands are out of the backfield. And then, of course, he missed the combine because of an injury. I don't necessarily remember exactly what happened with him, but he wasn't able to go through the combine drill. So nobody really doesn't. He's kind of a question mark right now as far as exactly what he can do. So his pro day will be really big.
So with these guys, are these because I'm not all that familiar with the draft class and where these kind of mid-round guys fall. Are these guys that we would have to go get with number 48, or are they third or fourth round guys? Like if we draft Dan Feeney, are we going to have to choose that over somebody like Perrine or Williams, or will we be able to kind of have our cake and eat it too?
And real quick too, I guess Foreman had a stress fracture in his foot, so that's why he didn't.
Jesus.
That's not good.
Yeah, it's not at all. But I think all those guys will be there in the third or fourth round. I think they'll be there, in my opinion. Foreman will probably be the highest drafted out of those three guys, just because of his skill set and what he actually brings to the table. I mean, the guy rushed for over 2,000 yards last year. Yikes. So the production is there. It's just, can he be, that 3-down back that teams covet these days? Because, honestly, guys, 2-down backs are like being phased out of the league really fast. If you can't pass protect and catch out of the backfield, it's really hard for you to play.
Ask AP.
Nowadays. Yeah.
I guess my question too is, as somebody who is ignorant of all the draft stuff, to me it seemed like bringing in Murray, he would be the third down guy, the thumper. To me, I immediately thought that if we were going to go in the draft and take somebody, we would look for somebody more like a Samuel, who I guess would overlap a lot with what Jerick McKinnon does as a change of pace type guy, or a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield and break it for a touchdown every play. But so you guys think that, I guess if we're looking at these type of players, what role do you see Murray having on the team?
Like we mentioned earlier, I think he's pretty much the new Asiata, in my opinion. He's just more of an upgrade, and I think what a lot of people really aren't thinking about is that both of these guys are on 1-year contracts, honestly. Murray's on a 1-year deal and McKinnon's on a 1-year deal. This is the last year of his contract. So I really don't know what exactly they will look at or look for in the draft. But the one thing they did do is that, Murray brings you the power aspect and McKinnon brings you the versatility aspect. So really they can pick the best running back on their board. And that's what I really like what they did. I really don't think they wanted to go into the draft with just McKinnon, because that kind of pigeonholes them into like, oh man, we need a power back. We have to have a power back, because, there's questions about McKinnon, whether he can be a be a 3-down back.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of people really don't know if he can be a number one option. That's the biggest question about McKinnon right now.
I think Murray's contract answers that question pretty well, and I think it pretty much says that. I mean, he's making, what is his cap hit, like $3.5 million this year, and he can be cut with like $500,000 dead or something totally negligible like that. So, the contract we signed him to is very much you're going to be a role player, you're going to be part of a committee. He's not going to be the kind of premier. He's not going to. I'm not drafting Latavius Murray in fantasy football. Say it that way. He's not going to be the guy that gets all the reps, and he's certainly not going to be both in style and in just sheer volume and reps. He's not going to be Adrian Peterson. I actually think the leading rusher of the Vikings in 2017 is not on the team yet.
Wow.
I 100% agree with that.
That's a spicy take, man. The way I write articles, I guess, and the way that I come to the podcast is kind of from more of a fan perspective. Like, I'll admit when I don't know what I'm talking about, just because I don't want to sound like a moron. But I think people have like really high expectations for Murray, so it's kind of surprising to for me, just from the perspective of the stuff that I've been reading from fans online, I guess they just assumed he'd be like the immediate 3-down guy, and they would sprinkle in some McKinnon every once in a while, but he would essentially just take over the offense, and we don't have to focus on running back in the draft anymore. But no, it's really interesting that that's not going to be the case. I mean, I don't know. I find that surprising. So outside of like the offensive line or tackles and running back, JR, what do you think are some of our other focuses for the draft?
How about cornerback?
Yeah.
It's a deep corner class, and we just lost one of our better corners in Captain Munderland. And I've been telling people, do we really think in a deep corner class that Mike Zimmer is not going to get one of his choice? I highly doubt that.
Yeah.
He's going to be banging the table for one of these guys.
What do you think about Mackenzie Alexander? Because I know that in the 2016 draft, the Mackenzie Alexander pick was the one I probably had the most problems with. And he kind of you do like him.
Yeah,
you want to talk about his skill set for people who don't watch him maybe as closely?
Yeah, well, he actually was the number one corner on my board last year.
Wow.
I love Mackenzie. I was a big fan of him. The thing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand about Mackenzie is that a lot of people have came out and said that he's very high maintenance. And what that means is that, he's very, very confident in his abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And, I like DBs that are like that because I think that's one position that you have to be very confident in. And I think that's half the battle.
Isn't that like the anti-Trey Waynes kind of with the way Waynes plays? He's so tentative. It seemed like Alexander was the opposite. He was, overly aggressive. They were kind of two on opposite sides of the coin, I guess. But we're gonna have to. I'm a big Trey Waynes guy, and I've explained the dynamic with my support for Trey Waynes getting me kicked off Reddit, and that's essentially what started my website to begin with. So I believe in him, man. I don't think he's like terrible or anything. I think he's serviceable, and I think going into this season, he's gonna obviously have to prove himself. I don't know if Terrence Newman can dodge Father Time for much longer, but yeah, there's definitely. I think the one, people talked about the mass exodus of free agents or whatever, just based on that Ellison Facebook post, but I think the only piece that really hurt in free agency in regards to players that we lost was Captain Munderland. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, what guys do you think we'll be able to target, like in the third, fourth round?
There's a lot of guys. I came out with a mock draft a couple of days ago. I had them selecting Howard Wilson from Houston.
Okay.
I think he's a guy that Zimmer will really, really love. He's 6 foot, about 185, 190 pounds, so he's right in that range that Zimmer likes. His 6 foot DBs.
Yeah.
Captain kind of went against that rule, but I think Howard Wilson is a guy that they'll really like. And another one that he's actually one of my draft crushes this year. His name is Akilo Weatherspoon from Colorado. He's 6'3".
Wow.
He's 190 pounds. But
he's a corner?
Yeah, he's a corner. He's really good. Despite being that tall, he has really, really good hips, surprisingly.
Like the anti-Trey Waynes.
Yeah, my comp for him was actually Richard Sherman.
Wow.
So, yeah, he's a really good player. Now, they actually have a corner on the other side of him that's getting a lot of attention. His name is Chidobe Awuzie. He's he's getting a lot of the attention, but I think Witherspoon is better. I actually graded him as a higher player.
Well, can you imagine having Rhodes and Waynes both being 6-footers, and you have a 6'3" guy that's coming in? That in this division, especially, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely.
This division is becoming less of a wide receiver division, though. I mean, Jordy Nelson's old, Alshon Jeffrey's gone, Calvin Johnson's gone. It's kind of
for sure, but the quarterbacks are still two. We got 2 top 5 quarterbacks in our division, so I mean they make
and one
happen.
Mike Glennon.
I'm looking for people listening. When this is posted, there's also going to be a mock draft by Arif Hassan posted on the site that I'll link in the article about the podcast. If that's like makes any sense, it's kind of meta. But he in the third round he picked Marcus Williams, safety out of Utah, and I know people haven't really been focusing a lot on finding someone to play alongside Harrison Smith, considering the offensive line and stuff that's happened in free agency. But
Anderson Dejo improved too.
Totally. So I mean, do you guys think that we'll go that route for looking for a safety that early in the draft?
Arif is very, very excited. He's mentioned a bunch of times across many platforms how excited he is about the safety class.
Okay.
He just wants one.
Very deep safety class. Really good. Really, really good safety class.
Yeah, man. His mock draft, he always has, like Luke's punter article, he has, analytics to back up kind of what he's saying as opposed to just saying things that he thinks like I do. But, yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be bad to find another safety, I guess? But
I mean, having competition for a guy like Sendejo is going to be great because while Sendejo improved to like average, he's still, there's still that dream of having, back when guys like Eric Weddle or Eric Berry were going to be free agents and we like all dreamed about having Smith and Weddle in the same backfield. Like that could still be realized if you pick one of these safeties and they turn out to be, just like as good as they're supposed to be. That's still an improvement on your team, even though it isn't at the greatest point of need. You're still making strides and using your resources to make your team better, which is always good.
Absolutely. And then Mike Zimmer floated out the other day that he's, Greenway's moved on and, he's retired. And he came out and said that he's looking for a guy to, more of a safety linebacker hybrid role. And who knows, maybe Sendejo can move down in the box and fill that role and, we can find another running mate for Harrison Smith. That was the idea.
I hadn't thought of that. That's fun.
Yeah. So maybe that's something we see in training camp.
Yeah, doesn't Gerald Hodges want to come back?
Yeah, I don't think the Vikings want him back.
I don't think so.
I'd like it, but I don't think the Vikings want it.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big Hodges fan, mainly because he's a Big Ten guy. But
he's a fine depth dude. Oh, hey, speaking of hybrid players, JR, what are your thoughts on Dayton Jones? Because I don't know much about the guy, but it seemed like Vikings Twitter was super excited when we signed him.
Good player. A lot of fans like to look at stats and like, oh man, he had like 1 or 2 sacks a year ago, but he led the Packers in pressures, and
way more important.
I think pressures are more important than sacks. I think sacks are kind of like a sexy stat to me. It just means that you really finished the play. But I'm all about pressures.
90% of the play is a pressure, and the last 10% is a sack.
Absolutely. Perfect. Pressures create turnovers. I'm a firm believer in that.
Mm-hmm.
But just on the subject of Dayton Jones, he's a good player. He can play, either defensive end or defensive tackle. And, an underlying reason that I think they signed him was the whole Sharif Floyd deal. Just, lighting a fire under him and just saying, like, look, man, like, you're in a contract year and we know your knees are not healed, but we're trying to create some competition for you. Like, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to step up to the occasion and, get better and get healthy, or we're just going to move on?
It's a nice little backup plan. I think the general consensus is that when 2018 comes and it's time to re-sign one of these guys, somewhere in their plan for the 2018 cap budget, there is a 3-tech contract in there, and now they have 2 options as to like who that goes to, which is awesome. I think if I were a betting man, I would think that Sharif Floyd steps up to that occasion. I've talked a lot on this podcast about what I think of his injury situation and how his injury proneness was kind of blown out of proportion, but I think
Sharif Floyd.
If I'm wrong about that, they have a backup plan. And I think if I were the Vikings, I would want a backup plan in case I'm wrong about that. So I'm really happy with that signing for that reason.
And it was weird because there was that news that I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, but the nose tackle from the Bengals, Damata Peko, was.
Peko, yeah.
Yeah, DeMonte Peko.
Yeah, he came out and
said. The long hair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He came out and said the Vikings were super interested in signing him, and then Zimmer had an interview, I think, with ESPN 1500 or maybe the Pioneer Press, and kind of said I know the guy, I love him, but we had no interest in him. We have Linval Joseph, like we don't need him. But I don't know. I thought that was an interesting situation. I don't get why he would say that if it wasn't true.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he would say that either, but Zimmer kind of dismissed it really quick. He was like, he's a great kid, but we weren't interested. So
and I don't think there was a need there either. It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But
did that come before they signed Jones?
I think that he said Peko said that after he signed with Denver, I think. So it happened after we signed Jones.
Okay. Because I could see the reasoning for like wanting to lie about that and being like, no, we totally weren't interested if we hadn't signed another guy we were interested in.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't look good for the guy that's currently on the team, but it also doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, Joseph is one of our top 3 defensive players. I mean, if you want to name MVPs on the defense would be Harrison Smith and him, and Eric Kendricks maybe, Everson Griffin. Our defense is stacked.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Terrence Newman, Xavier Rhodes.
I mean,
yeah,
Trey
Rhodes
Waynes.
for sure. Newman last year, but not in the long term. But not in the long term, of course. And hopefully Barr comes back from his, what I think was a wrist injury that was underreported.
Okay.
I hope so.
Yeah, I don't know. I found it odd that he got upset that Zimmer said he was coasting in the media, if that's even true. But I mean, we've talked about that a lot on the show, that perhaps Barr was injured and he had an injury and he didn't feel confident in whatever the injury was to go 100%, like if it was a knee or a foot or whatever. But he needs to step it up big time. JR, the guy, the 6'3" corner you were talking about, would he be a nickel guy then, or would he just more be a backup for Trey Waynes, or I guess a possible replacement?
Yeah, he's more of an outside guy. I don't really think he's more of a nickel guy. He's strictly an outside guy. You know, I've said repeatedly that nickel corner is the hardest position on defense.
Okay.
Like you're totally you're on an island. You have a three-way go. A receiver has a three-way go on you, and you really don't know which way he can go. The thing about being an outside corner is that you can use the sideline to your advantage, and that's the biggest difference between being an outside corner and a nickel corner.
And that's what Rhodes is really good at, right?
Absolutely. He's really good at, funneling receivers to the sideline and pushing them out of bounds. He's really good at that. But the thing about nickel corner is that, they can go left, right, or vertical.
Yeah.
And you really don't know which way they can go. On the outside receiver, they can only go so far outside, depending on which side they're on, because you can use the out of bounds line to your advantage. But at nickel corner, you're totally on the island.
So what do you think they're going to do with Captain Munnerling gone? I know we kind of touched on this, but now that we're back at it, I don't know, that kind of scares me that he's not on the team anymore. I think that's going to be
that's the one I'm the most sad about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a devastating loss to go from Captain Munnerlin right now to what we saw from Mackenzie Alexander last year, and hopefully he can improve, and hopefully he can come back and and get the nickel position down. But nickel not only is, if it's, I believe you that it's that difficult, it's also extraordinarily important. Because, slot receivers can just gash you if you have a bad one back there.
No, I think JR's right. He said earlier that, especially with Zimmer being involved, that corners are going to be probably a day one or early day two focus. I mean, we don't have a day one pick, I guess, the way they do it.
You mean
now.
2 or 3. I get what you mean.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that might. I guess my question is, what do you think is more important, shoring up the guard position now, or going after a good nickel corner? If there's one worth taking in the second round.
I go guard.
That's a better question than I thought it'd be. Yeah, I think I'd have to give it to guard, but
But who do we
Nick
have?
corner is important.
Yeah, I mean we have.
At least we have a guy on the roster.
There you go.
But if we don't get a guard, I'm curious actually to get both your thoughts on this. If we don't end up getting a guard, say we draft like Taylor Moton at number 48, and by the time the third round hits, we have better options, and we end up getting a safety and somebody else, and we end up not really getting a guard. And Jeremiah Searles is kind of the de facto starter there with probably some other competition behind him.
Yeah.
How would you guys feel about that?
I guess it would depend. To me, it would just depend on who they're taking. I mean, this is a perfect show to have JR on because, like he said earlier in the show, he became a Vikings fan during the Moss and Culpepper era, and so I'm so biased towards adding skill play. I'm basically like Matt Millen with a website. So I guess it would depend on what skill player we took in lieu of a guard. I don't think personally though, rationally, I think we have some depth at the guard position. Berger is not going to retire. Searles was okay before he got switched around to different positions last season, I think.
Right guard was his best position for
totally.
Sure.
And so I'm confident with Searles there, and a lot of that has to do with my Big Ten bias, to be for sure. But I think that after talking this out with you guys, since I have no social interaction outside of the girl at the gas station, we have to go corner. We have to find somebody. I don't feel comfortable with Mackenzie Alexander being our day one nickel corner with really no competition behind him. That just doesn't.
Yeah, I think you need to get some competition, right? You can't make him the de facto starter. I don't want to do a Khalil with him, where Khalil was just the starter and never got any competition. That might be my biggest problem with the offensive line handling over the last couple of years.
And Zimmer is the quote unquote quarterback guru, so we can probably expect good things. But I don't know, the idea of Waynes and Alexander starting next to each other, or being out there on third down, just kind of freaks me out a little bit. I think that's. I'm
all right with Waynes. I mean, he's no Rhodes, he's no Newman. Once I fully expect Newman to not be as good as he was last year.
Do you think he starts?
But Waynes?
Newman.
I actually heard an interesting thought on this that I love, and it's moving Newman into the slot on nickel downs, and then having him play outside on base downs, and then on nickel downs, Waynes plays outside. So he's basically the nickel package cornerback, but he's always just on the outside, and it's just a rotation that way. So Newman plays both inside and outside.
That wouldn't be bad.
I would be fine with that. Yeah, I would be fine, just as long as Trey Waynes is not in that nickel. That would be a disaster.
If he's in the slot position, that probably shouldn't be the...
Waynes, to me, I played hockey my entire life, and I had stereotypical Minnesota hockey parents who would yell things at you from the stands and get in fistfights with refs. Not really, but kind of. And it seems like when he has a bad play, he shrugs his shoulders and kind of looks over to Zimmer like, what else can I do? I'm trying. He gets really frustrated in a negative sort of way, he internalizes it a lot. And maybe I'm just projecting because that's the way that I used to scream at my parents while playing hockey. I can't, it wasn't my fault. But it kind of was in retrospect. I don't know, I just feel like Waynes doesn't have the right mentality. It seems like he's just... The additional focus that Zimmer gave him when they drafted him, I think he just handled it wrong. I think he put too much pressure on himself, and I don't know. It's just he seems to be a different kind of guy than from what I saw when he was at Michigan State, I guess. Nothing.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Pre-draft, I wasn't really a big Trey Waynes fan, honestly. He actually was the fourth corner on my board, and I wasn't really happy when they selected him.
You were a big Marcus Peters guy.
Yeah, I'm a huge Marcus Peters guy. He's actually one of my favorite prospects I've ever graded. I thought really, really highly of Peters, and I think his off the field questions were kind of overblown because he never really had.
I think we got duped on that.
Never really had any. And let me explain that. All his really red flags were on the field.
Yeah, sideline tantrum.
Sideline tantrums. And, the only off-the-field issue is that he did fail a drug test. That's the one issue he did have, but that was early on in his career. I believe he was a freshman when it happened.
Didn't he get kicked off the team?
Yeah, just for his sideline antics and things like that. And the biggest reason for that is, the coaches he played under, those weren't the guys that recruited him. So he had a lot of disagreements with those guys.
Okay.
And he didn't necessarily have chemistry with those guys in his time at Washington. And that was a big reason for a lot of his tantrums, just because he didn't really trust the coaches and he didn't really have chemistry with those guys during his time there. So a lot of his red flags and, attitude problems really were overblown, in my opinion, because he's a heck of a player. And I said it pre-draft. He's a outstanding.
Do you think he's a top 10 corner in the league right now?
Wow.
Absolutely. I think so.
Yeah.
Look at the first snap he played, he got a pick off Brian Hoyer, and then the second quarter of his second game, he picked off Peyton Manning for a pick six. Third game, he picked off Teddy Bridgewater. I mean,
he's a ball magnet, man. Ball hawk. He has receiver hands at corner.
I think Waynes benefited tremendously from the team defense that Michigan State had. They had the no-fly zone or whatever. But that was a team-based thing. There was a lot of pressures and everything. I mean, it wasn't like he was a shutdown guy. He was more of a system guy, I guess is my point. So I think he's definitely not a bust. He's going to be a decent player, but I'm not sure he was the right pick at 11, to be honest.
JR, I know you just recently posted a mock. I would love to hear a real quick blow-by-blow as we get down to the end of the show here on those picks. And I know we've kind of talked about some of it with Dan Feeney and stuff, but yeah. I'd love to hear a quick blow-by-blow of it.
Yeah, no problem. The first guy I had was Dan Feeney. You guys know how I feel about him to this point. He's a guy I would really love for the Vikings to take at 48. I'm starting to think that he won't be there just because his stock is kind of getting higher. And the biggest reason for that is, some teams had some questions about his concussion history, but he's only had one to this point. But for some reason, it seems like a common consensus that he had like 5 or 6, but he only had one. And he missed 6 games for it last season. And, when they did, he missed 6 games for it last season. And no red flags or anything like that came up at the combine for it. So I'm assuming that, he checked out fine from it and he's moved on from that concussion. The second pick I had Pat Elflein from Ohio State, the center. He's a guy I'm really high on. He's a great prospect, not the most athletic, but he's one of those guys that is really smart, and it helps overcome his lack of abilities, so to speak. He's a great technician, and he's just a good football player, man. He's one of those guys that's a plug-and-play center, and he's a guy that I think can overtake Joe Berger because, he's getting a little long in the tooth. I believe he's like 35 years old.
Yeah, he was about to retire. They thought he might.
Yeah.
And there's Nick Easton, too. Do you think he's not really the long-term solution at the center?
He didn't really – I think he started 4 or 5 games last season, but he didn't necessarily flash a lot like you would have liked. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Totally.
He didn't really get better.
And it was hard because, he's playing with T.J. Clemmings, a spot over from him, too. The line was a complete disaster. So absolutely. We'll see how he plays with better players next to him, but I definitely I like that pick.
Yeah. The next guy I had in the third round with their second third round pick, was Howard Wilson. I talked about him a little earlier, the cornerback from Houston.
Yep.
Great size, great length, great ball skills. He has that, pit bull mentality that you love to see in cornerbacks, and you see him getting in guys' faces, pressing at the line of scrimmage, and he really excels in man-to-man coverage, which is what the Vikings run and excel at. So he would be a really good fit.
He's not the 6'3" guy, right? The 6'3" guy
from
he's Colorado?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The next guy I had was Ardarius Stewart. He's a wide receiver from Alabama. He kind of puts you in the mindset of Cordero Patterson. He's more of a gadget guy, but he really falls into that repertoire of SEC receivers that are underutilized just because they're in run-first oriented offenses. And when
you just triggered Joe.
Oh my God! I have an
erection. SEC receivers.
I wrote an article like a month ago, basically about the history of the Vikings taking SEC receivers and how they've all basically been busts. Like the best out of the bunch is probably Jarius Wright.
Sidney Rice, Troy Williamson. They're always SEC guys.
Greg Childs.
That name brings nightmares. Childs was a good player. He just had
that was sad, man. Yeah. I rooted for him, but it didn't work out. Is he kind of – see, I'm kind of in the same position as I think the Vikings do need a gadget player on their offense. I don't think we have that guy. McKinnon's probably the closest thing to it, but I don't know. That's why I'm a big Curtis Samuel guy personally. But
he would be a good pick. But the thing about Stewart is that he's more of a polished receiver than Patterson. He's a defined route runner, and he's really detailed in his routes. And when they do get him the ball, he makes plays. That's the good thing about him. He's very explosive when he does touch the ball. But he was just in a run-first oriented offense, so you really never got to see him to his full potential. But when they did get him the ball, he did score.
What's his name again?
Ardarius Stewart.
Okay. I'm going to post the video on our podcast page for people to see his highlights.
He had a really good combine. The next pick was Duke Riley. He's an outside linebacker from LSU. I want to go back into the well of these LSU linebackers, man. There's just something about it. Deion Jones, Quan Alexander. There's just something about those LSU linebackers that I really like. And they're kind of transcending the game. The NFL is becoming more of a passing league. So
Yeah.
More of those 2-down linebackers are really being phased out of the league. And, these longer, leaner linebackers that can run, run support and, defend the pass as well. That's kind of becoming more of the modern day NFL game. They took a guy last year in Kentrell Brothers that's more of a 2-down guy. Riley puts you more in the frame of a 3-down guy. He can play outside linebacker or he can play inside as well. He's done both at LSU. And he would fill in right away for Chad Greenway from day one. I think very, very highly of Duke Riley.
Yikes.
5th round pick was kind of a sleeper pick here. TJ Logan, running back from North Carolina.
Ooh, hometown
he's more
boy.
of a guy. Yeah, he's more of a guy like puts you in the mindset of my comparison for him was Kenyon Barner. I don't know if you guys remember him from Oregon. He's pretty much Jerick McKinnon. That's pretty much what he is. But the reason why I slotted him in this particular area is the guy averaged 33 yards per kick return. And, he's very, very valuable on special teams as well. That's kind of like his niche.
Yeah, man, and that's something we completely glossed over. But, there's the huge topic probably for next week is the kick returner spot and what we're going to do there. So,
ooh, I should write about that.
That's a good pick, man.
Yeah, so
that's
Logan
fun. So,
really good pick.
So does that mean that you would be relying on Latavius Murray a lot more throughout the season? You'd be down for that?
Yeah, I would be perfectly fine with that. It'd still be running back by committee.
Right.
Works for Atlanta.
My 6th round pick was Cole Hakatini. He's a tight end from Louisville. Pushing the mind of a Jordan Cameron type of tight end, a guy that's able to run block and, run routes as well. He can stretch the field. He didn't necessarily run the combine. He didn't participate in the 40-yard dash at the combine. But on film, you can see he's around a 4.7, 4.65 kind of guy.
Okay.
So the speed is there. He's not necessarily like a Kyle Rudolph. That's a slower guy that doesn't really necessarily break tackles. He's a very athletic guy. He's 6'4", 250 pounds. So he's a big guy. And, I think the chasing of Jared Cook kind of told me something. They want a guy behind Rudolph that can catch balls as well.
Yeah.
And they need a guy,
They want to have two of them.
Yeah, because, David Morgan isn't necessarily a threat in the passing game. He can catch the ball, but he's more of a run blocker.
Rhett Ellison was always an underrated outlet receiver, and I think they want to replace that facet of his game.
Absolutely.
Bow ringer.
And here we go. I ended the draft with a bang.
Ooh.
My last pick in the 7th round, Josh Dobbs, quarterback, Tennessee.
Whoa, man.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I kind of, I don't necessarily think they trust Heineke after his whole, ankle incident.
Yeah.
And he hasn't played in an NFL game to this point, guys. And it's going on year 3. It's going on year 3 for him. So I don't necessarily know how much they trust him. And I think Dobbs will be a good pick. He'd be a great developmental option behind Sam Bradford. And I really don't know if the Vikings need a veteran behind Bradford because, he's a veteran. When you have a veteran behind another guy, it's usually a young guy 9 times out of 10. I don't necessarily know if they need a veteran behind him. And I think Dobbs would be a great developmental option. And he fits Shermer's offense really well.
Big time. Yeah, I think Heineke, he's kind of reached the logical conclusion of his career. He's not going to be a career backup sort of guy. I mean, especially
really, I think he could Josh McCown his way into like a really bad decision to sign him. Like he could end up starting for like the Jets, and it would be a bad choice. I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's when your quarterback's problem-solving skills is to put his foot through a glass window, you kind of have to wonder how that's going to work. That's not bad, man. I'm not going to lie. I
would be thrilled with that draft.
Oh, I can't wait for the draft, man.
It's so much
Best
fun.
time of the year.
What do you do for the draft? I mean, you obviously are probably on your computer writing about stuff, but I mean, I don't know. This is like our first real. The site's only been around since 2015. It came in May, and then last year we had like a live chat, but there's just me and like Luke for 5 minutes. It was really awkward. But this year I'm just trying to see I'm trying to organize like some sort of online event for the draft, and I'm just wondering what other people are doing, so people that listen know maybe they could follow you on Twitter or join you in a Viking Age chat room or something like that, or message board more.
Yeah. Last year I live tweeted the draft. Just what I thought. I don't necessarily just focus on the Vikings during the draft. As far as when I tweet, I don't necessarily just focus on the Vikings. I kind of just give my thoughts and everything about each and every pick and how it necessarily kind of compares to my draft board as well. But afterwards, I kind of just sit back and let everything soak in before I start writing, because I'm not a guy that just, reacts right off of there, because you can type something that you don't really necessarally mean before you sit back and actually think about it.
That's my entire MO right there.
Yeah.
Regretful pieces.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. I wanted to thank you again for coming on the show and sharing your insight, and I want people to be able to follow you on Twitter and stuff. So again, your Twitter handle is JReid, which is REID Draft Scout, right? There's no underscore in there? Okay.
No underscore.
And I will add that on the article for this too, but we're kind of getting to the point where we're going to go over the allotted YouTube time. I don't think they want this much Joe Johnson on anything, so you guys have any final thoughts? Or
I just want to thank you guys for letting me come on, man, and I had a pleasure.
We'd love to have you back, man. Talk after the draft and see what your thoughts are on the picks that we did take and everything. So
that'd be amazing.
We'll have you back on. Hopefully when Joe reemerges from his sabbatical in the wilderness.
Tell Joe I said hello.
Yeah, we'll send out some sort of.
I don't want to interrupt him right now because I think he's fighting a literal bear.
It's like the end of what's that movie? Never mind.
The beginning of the one Leo won for, The Revenant.
Oh, I was thinking of the Brad Pitt movie. Not A River Runs Through It, but the other one where he fights a bear at the end and dies. This show this is the worst way to end a show ever. But
wait, can I end the show with a steaming hot take?
Yeah, do it.
NFL teams are bad.
Okay.
NFL scouts should not be relied upon as sources of opinions because NFL scouts in general are bad.
Bad at what?
Scouting. They're bad at general evaluation and are subject to way too many biases, mainly because their owners are all old billionaires.
Okay. Well,
there's my hot take. End the show on that.
Drop the mic. All right. Well, with that, this has been the Purple Journal podcast. Check out our Facebook page, purplePTSD, and Twitter. And also, if you have time, check out VikingsTerritory.com because we're buddies with those guys and they do great work. But with that, I want to thank JR for coming on the show again, and not thank Luke